Ladies and gentlemen, with me on the other end, Joel Salatin, third-generation farmer, runs the Polyface Farms. The farm services over 5,000 families, 50 restaurants, and 5 retail outlets. You've seen him with the giant hat on Food Inc., the documentary in 2009. He's an author and speaker whose books include You Can Farm, Salad Bar Beef, and Folks, This Ain't Normal. Joel, my man, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Listen, before we get going, I am a huge fan of your work. I've been following it for years, and it's really an honor to talk with you today. I've listened to pretty much everything you've done, so huge fan over here.
Thank you very much. Great.
So, based on my very limited experience speaking with farmers, I don't know too many, but I get the impression that farming is kind of something. It's a lifestyle. It's something you are born into. Was that the case for you? How'd you get involved in farming?
Yeah, well, I was certainly born into it. My dad always aspired to be a full-time farmer. Never didn't really make that happen in his lifetime, but he set up a stage to where Teresa and I could launch, and so we've certainly enjoyed it. But I started with my first batch of chickens when I was 10. Mom and Dad bought this farm in 1961. I was just 4 years old. And so I grew up here and started a flock of chickens when I was 10, kind of my own business, and always gave me my spending money through high school and teenage years and stuff, and was direct marketing and selling to neighbors, a couple restaurants, a couple schools, at a local curb market, which kind of was a Depression era precursor to today's farmers markets, and just really, looking back, sometimes you don't realize what you're thinking when you're a kid, but I think subconsciously, I just really enjoyed kind of being in the center of abundance.
Yeah, and
the idea of being able to walk out of your back stoop and just know that you're kind of in this womb or this nest of abundance just really resonated with me and still does.
Absolutely. And so you run Polyface Farms now in Virginia, correct?
Yes.
Is that the farm you grew up working on?
Yeah. Well, we didn't name it Polyface until Teresa and I, launched. Kind of we came back full time. I mean, I was gone from the farm for a couple of years. Went to college and then did the typical. You go to college and then you. I initially didn't see a way to make a living here. Initially, I thought, well, this was the late 70s. It was the Nixon era, Watergate, and I figured, I had a flair for writing. I knew that, that I had some talent there, and so, I thought, well, I'll go be another Woodward and Bernstein, find my deep throat and make my mint, and then I can retire to the farm as a, that was kind of my game plan. And as it turned out, I got on at the local newspaper and as a reporter, and that allowed me to live here at home. So I did the farm commute thing for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then we, by being here and living very frugally, driving a $50 car, growing all of our own food, growing all of our own fuel, not going to movies, not going out to eat, wearing thrift store clothes. The point was we were able to live so cheaply that even on, pretty nominal salaries, we were able to save a substantial amount so that we could make that jump and essentially take a year. And I fully expected to go back, to outside employment, but as it turns out, we never did because our expenses dropped so much when we came home full time.
Yeah.
And not only did our expenses drop because we weren't, driving to town, but secondly, we were here for everything. And in farming, well, a lot of things in life, but in farming for sure, a lot of things depend on strategic timing. If you wait for the weeds to get so big that they're hard to pull, it's twice as hard to weed something than if you get them when they've just germinated and you can just knock them with a stirrup hoe, for example. We were here for every calf that was born. So if there was a problem delivery, we could help the cow and not lose the calf. So the thing that really changed things that made us go, should I say, over budget, and I mean over budget in a good way. In other words, we were planning for this much, and then we ended up, being twice as good. Was just that we did not realize how much our presence here would eliminate slippage and let us be more strategic and efficient with our time.
So what I'm hearing there is that at Polyface Farms, you guys are very resourceful, and you use what you have around, and you use it for everything. And so some people would say you at your farm do things a little differently. What's kind of going on at Polyface Farms that you do that a lot of other farms maybe don't do?
Well, several things, but they're pretty basic. I mean, for example, for one thing, animals move. We live in a time when in our greater farming culture, we don't think animals are supposed to move. They're supposed to be locked up in concentrated animal feeding operations known as factory farms, and or I call them concentration camps, and they're locked up there and don't move. And what that does is it sets up, as soon as you assume animals move, then it sets up a whole series of kind of a domino consequences. If you say, well, animals don't need to move, they're supposed to be pinned up in a factory, then that sets up another set of circumstances, another context. And so because we say animals move, then obviously we had to develop portable water systems, portable shelter systems, portable control systems, because, the neighbors don't want the animals on their place.
Yeah.
And so, that was one. A second one is that food and farmscapes should be highly integrated. They should be diversified, integrated, as opposed to segregated. And as you know, mainline farming, you think of an apple grower or a soybean grower or a dairy farmer. We think of farmers in terms of kind of one item.
The monocrop.
A monospecies or monocrop, exactly. And that's not the way nature is. Nature is highly diversified. And there is no animal-less ecosystem. There is no ecosystem that doesn't have animals. And, historically, one of the functions of animals was to move fertility around. Think about it. If you didn't have tractors and wheels, how is nature going to move the fertility that naturally accumulates in a valley from a gravitational movement of minerals and soil and biomass? How is it going to move that fertility accumulating in the valley and get it back up onto the ridgetop and the slopes? Well, it does it with animals. Animals, graze and eat in the valleys where it's fertile, and then predation pushes them up on top where they lounge, ruminate, chew their cud, poop, and pee, and start that fertility cycle around again. So we, we're big on the fact that a regenerative ecological farm has to have animals. That they fill this wonderful function. Another thing is that we believe that animals should be able to integrate symbiotically with what we're doing. So, for example, instead of giving the cows Ivomec and grubicides and parasiticides, we follow them with egg mobiles. The chickens scratch through the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, and spread the cow patties out and sanitize the paddock like the egret on the rhino's nose, like the birds that follow the wildebeest in the Serengeti.
Don't you call that the salad bar?
Yeah, well, it's the herbivores are certainly eating the salad bar.
Oh, it's the herbivores.
But the birds following the herbivores are essentially a biological sanitizer. So what we're doing is, here's the point. What we're doing is nothing new. It is simply looking at ancient wisdom. It is looking at how things functioned, and essentially drawing that template out with modern, absolutely, we're not Luddites, but with modern technology like electric fencing. We don't have fire and wolves to move the herbivores around. What we have is electric fencing with microchip energizers, okay? And we don't have, passenger pigeon flocks that block out the sun for 3 days like they used to, but what we do have is chickens. but we get the mobbing, we get the flocking together with again high-tech space age electrified netting. It's little stainless steel filaments running on polyethylene threads. I mean, so we're using technology, but not to change nature, but simply to come along as a masseuse, if you will, to caress nature with high technology so we don't adulterate these basic patterns.
God, I love that point. It's not new, it's old, it's ancient, and that's kind of why it works. I love that point.
Yeah, it's way more ancient than antibiotics, let me tell you. Yeah. Way more ancient.
Absolutely. So I wanted to touch on kind of, I guess, a why, what, how format. So why what we're currently doing isn't working, what you're doing that is working, and then how the person at home can maybe incorporate some of those things into their life and really start turning it around. But I mean, I think you touched on the first part, that kind of why, like what's wrong with the factory farming. It's those three things you mentioned. The animals don't move, it's not diversified, and it's not integrated.
Right. Well, and the result of all that, the thing is, the result of all that is a new lexicon that we have learned. Anybody over 50 years old, I do this all the time. I do a lot of speaking, and I always ask the crowd, I said, anybody here over 50, put your hand up if you ever heard, until you were 35 years old, did you ever hear the phrase food allergy? Did you ever hear the phrase gluten-free? Did you ever hear the phrase, autism, Campylobacter, Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, bovine spongiform encephalopathy? I'm going down this list, and nobody. We grew up. These things didn't exist. They weren't in the lexicon. And today, every school child, spits off these phrases in this lexicon as if it's common language.
Right.
And so what this new lexicon is it's a manifestation of nature batting last, saying, okay, fool me once, fool me twice. Eventually, I'm going to balance this. I'm going to balance the sheet out. You can't abuse me except but so much, and here are the results. And so that's exactly what we're seeing. So when you ask why, the fact is that the United States leads the world in the 5 non-infectious morbidity rate. We lead the world in per capita expenditure on health care. We lead the world in rates of autism. We lead the world. I mean, look, these are not things you want to be on the top of the, these are not things you want to lead on. And they are all symptomatic of the fact that we lead the world in taking a mechanical view toward life and a mechanistic view toward life. And when you view life as fundamentally mechanical rather than biological, it sets up a whole series of issues that culminate in the kind of lexicon that we have learned to speak now. So the answer is not more pharmaceuticals, more vaccines, more concrete, more fans, more, manure lagoons, whatever. Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so if all of this confinement, segregation, and infrastructure and doping, if that has created the problem that we have, then what's the opposite of that? And the opposite of that is, of course, a situation in which we have highly integrated systems, we have decentralized systems, and we have carbon-centric systems where sanitation, hygiene, and cleanliness come from composting and rapid degeneration or rapid decomposition, as opposed to vaccination and drug use, pharmaceutical use.
Joel, you started to touch on a point, and it's one of them that I heard from you. I think it was on a radio show or a lecture you were doing, and it totally changed the way I started looking at food. And it was that we do not have a production problem, but we have a distribution problem. And that half the food in the world goes uneaten.
That's right.
That's amazing.
Well, it is. And, what's interesting is that even, we hear about, the world's got too many people, we're overpopulated, this population thing's out of control.
Right.
And the fact is that never in the Earth's history have we produced twice as much food as we need on the planet. We've never done that before. And we are doing that today. Believe me, the Monsantos of the world, the Ciba-Geigys, the ConAgras, they love to have people running around like Henny Penny saying the world's overpopulated. We've got to feed the world. We've got to figure out how to produce more.
Yeah.
No, if you could double production tomorrow, not one single additional tummy would be full. Now, that's not a harsh thing. That's reality. The fact is that nobody goes hungry because there's not enough food. They go hungry because it's not distributed in the right places. That could be socioeconomic. It could be a warlord holding an Uzi on a Red Cross relief truck.
Right.
It's the Syrian refugees. It's this kind of stuff. It's genocide in Rwanda. It's a bad road on the corner of a cliff in Nepal. It's not because there's not enough food. It's because there's all sorts of other distribution issues surrounding it. And so the industry loves to hear people paranoid and fearful about overpopulation and feeding the world, because what that fear does, and I would suggest sincere concern, is that it makes people swallow the idea that, well, if we don't have factory farms, if we don't have chemicals, if we don't have if we don't have all these things, then we won't be able to do it. And nothing could be further from the truth. The United States has 35 million acres of lawn and 36 million acres housing and growing feed for recreational horses. That's 71 million acres. That's enough to feed our entire country without a single farm or ranch.
That's amazing, man. And that's really amazing. It's going to be a hard pill for my neighbor to swallow. That his nice, pretty lawn that he waters 3 times a day isn't as necessary.
Yeah, and listen. I don't get me wrong. I'm not opposed to lawns. I'm not opposed to recreational horses. What I am saying, though, is that when you walk around, Henny Penny style, the sky is falling. The truth is, there's a whole lot of wiggle room and luxury currently built into the system. Cornell University up in New York did an interesting study about 4 years ago. They took the time period 1990 to 2005, a 15-year period, and the question was, how much farmland in the state of New York, just state of New York, how much farmland has been abandoned but is still privately owned? In other words, this is not land that got gobbled up for strip malls or condominiums or expressways or whatever. This is still privately owned land that is simply that was actively farmed before 1990 and today is not being farmed. It's just abandoned. And what they found in New York State alone was 3.1 million acres. And if you drive upstate New York, Ithaca and up through there, Syracuse, you will just go by mile after mile after mile of early forested, 20-foot tall saplings that are this whole abandoned, very, very, very fertile farmland. That's just been abandoned, and of course, what made it abandoned was the tax rates. New York City and the urban areas, Buffalo and New York City, pushed the rural tax rates up so far that it drove all the farmers off the land, and so nothing's being done with it, and all that land obviously could be impressed back into service.
Wow, and so to keep touching on this really important point with, some lands we could reclaim, or people's lawns could get converted to gardens, or that half the world's food goes uneaten and we have a distribution problem. Why does it seem to be the focus that global hunger. That seems to be the focus, and like enriching rice to help people that don't get the nutrition, or GMOs, or increasing production seems to be the main focus, not doing it more sustainably or taking what we already have. Like, it seems to be like we're trying to make more.
Well, it's much easier and much more what should I say, capitalistic friendly to try to solve to try to grow more on a smaller area than to change the demographics of a society so that more people have access to a square yard of land that they can work on.
Okay.
Or for that matter, to change the infrastructure, to change the road situation. There just isn't the incentive to do that. And
is it kind of a $0 question or a $0 problem?
Yeah,
right?
I think it is. The thing that I think that your listeners need to understand is that 400 years ago, North America produced far more food than it produces today. That's the thing that people have to understand.
Wow.
That when the buffalo and the passenger pigeon and the prairie chicken and the elk and the antelope and the Native American and the wolves ran this ecosystem, and the beavers. Don't leave out the beavers. 8% of America's landscape was in beaver ponds. And those, of course, have all now been drained, and now we have, of course, aquifer depletion and all this. The point is that nature wants a perennial system. It wants a highly integrated system, a relational system. And when you start breaking up the relationships, creating a segregated system, and you view water as a drainage problem instead of a hydration problem, all of these things, you actually have a much poorer production system than you did before. I mean, Audubon said he sat under a tree and he couldn't see the sun for 3 days for the number of birds flying over. The Native Americans have stories of where a flock of birds would come in and land in a forest near an Indian village, and in the morning the Indians would come out and look, and the whole forest was just tree spires standing up. All the limbs were knocked off, and there was an inch of bird poop on the ground. We don't have those kind of flocks anymore. A bison. I've got the most fascinating little paragraph from a diary in 1870 of a guy out in Arkansas that went up on a hill, and he said he saw a herd of buffalo 50 miles long and 20 miles wide, and you could not see the prairie between the animals. They were that thick on 50 miles by 20 miles. Captain Jim Bridger, when he went out to the Black Hills originally, he said he got behind a herd of 7 million bison, and they would have starved to death with their horses and what they were doing. They would have starved to death if they hadn't been carrying oats for their horses, because it took them 5 days to get out from behind this herd of bison to where there was any forage or fodder or anything for their horses. Wow. We have a hard time. If you go to California, the megafauna. The megafauna that was in California 400 years ago, that was not a forest as we see it today. The redwoods and stuff, they were much more spaced. There was much more distance between them. The spruces and aspen of Colorado, that today there are millions of acres that are burning and dead and burning. We are now spending over $100 million a week on fire suppression. And
yeah.
all of this is indicative of just a disappreciation. It's a disappreciation of a carbon-centric system. And in the ancient ecological systems, from the Native American to the bison to the wolves to the fire, that system ran off of symbiosis, diversity, and hydration and carbon. It didn't run on petroleum. It didn't run on any of that. It ran on a highly integrated complex, synergistic, symbiotic, carbon-centric system. And that system actually produced more food. Now, I mean, it was feeding 10 million wolves. Okay, but when I say that statistic, people look at me and say, "Oh, come on, wait a minute. Who was eating it all?" Well, wolves. And coyotes and a lot of and
a little less
and
picky.
beavers. I mean, yeah, there were millions and millions of beavers. So, and in fact, there was a big population of Native Americans here. Not as many people as there are today, but we now know that Nebraska and Kansas had a higher population 400 years ago in Kansas and Nebraska than live there today.
Whoa!
So the fact is that by the time the Europeans came, 90% of the native population had been wiped out with European diseases.
That's amazing.
And so that's where you get this manifest destiny in this wide open continent. Well, it wasn't until a century before the Europeans came. It wasn't a wide open continent. They were highly advanced. I mean, look at what the Incas and the Aztecs did, and now we know the Brazilian, the rainforest of the Amazon was not some sort of a haphazard jungle.
Yeah.
It was actually a planted garden with selected perennial tree cultivars, carefully selected by native wisdom, and that's why the jungle is such an amazing, productive, thing today. Not because it was haphazard, but because the cultivars were carefully selected over centuries.
So the Amazon in Brazil down there, or South America, was
right.
selected and planted?
Yes, absolutely. If you read the book 1491, 1491, you get a lot of this. Guns, Germs, and Steel goes into it some. 1493, the book goes into it some. But the whole biochar deal has all been spawned out of discovering these ancient deposits along the Amazon River and its tributaries that were from these highly advanced civilizations.
Wow.
That when you read the diaries of these early Spanish explorers, they were petrified. The only reason that the Spanish were able to conquer South America was because they had guns and steel, and those native populations didn't. But the native populations were physically larger, they were healthier, and they were far more populous.
Wow.
But they didn't have gunpowder, they didn't have steel, and those were the two things, and they didn't have the germs. And so that's why Guns, Germs, and Steel literally just wiped out these massive populations. It's truly quite profound.
It's kind of what we're doing today in the Amazon. Some companies are going in saying they want their land, and they'll give them all this money, and they kick them out, or they pay for it, and they go back in there. So we're seeing that today as well.
Yeah. There's a tremendous amount of displacement, both there and in Africa. Lots of Western corporate land grabbing in those areas. And again, that's why I say, when I was in Italy at the big low food convivium Terra Madre there in Turin, I was speaking, but when I wasn't speaking, I made a point of going to every African delegation that was there and listening to what the Africans had to say, and every single one of them started their presentation with, "We have plenty of markets, plenty of resources, and plenty of understanding and know-how. What's killing us is Western dumping from UNICEF, from the United Nations, from World Health Relief, from all these relief organizations. What you're doing is you're dumping in our countries, and you're displacing the work ethic, you're displacing the resource base, and you're turning us into a bunch of Western welfare parasites. And if you would just get out, we would see a blossoming of entrepreneurial indigenous understanding that would feed us and do us very well.
I heard that argument with Tom's Shoes. I don't know if you're familiar with them, that 1-for-1 program where you buy a pair of shoes and then they send one over to a kid in need, which is such a noble concept. I mean, helping people and giving back. I mean, I love that. But what you're saying is very true with Tom's Shoes. I was reading an article that said it displaced so many people's livelihoods because they were the shoemaker, or they had shoe repairs, or they were doing X, Y, and Z, and then everyone became dependent on these shoes, and then they have nowhere to go from it, and so it displaces a lot of it.
Yeah, I had a fascinating conversation with a guy who'd just come back from 6 weeks of filming documentaries over in, I'm not sure where he was, Congo, Kenya, somewhere. Yeah. You know, for us here in the U.S., you know, it's just Africa. You know, we don't, we know where Egypt is, you know where South Africa is, but, you know, when you start getting into the little nitty gritty, we're very geographically challenged. But anyway, this guy said that what he saw were these container loads of Western missionary barrels and container loads and things coming in. And he said what happened was that the entrepreneurs, you know, every society has its go-getters, you know, its little entrepreneurial fringe, if you will, the go-getters, and then it has the plotters, and then of course it has the followers. And what drives an economy, what drives a culture, of course, are the entrepreneurs, the go-getters, you know, the ones that are risk takers and I'm going to better things and whatever. And he said the problem is that all of this foreign aid comes in, and it doesn't displace the people down at the bottom, the followers. You know, it doesn't, because they don't have the initiative anyway. What it displaces are the go-getters, the entrepreneurs, the people up at the top. And guess what they turn into? They turn into these warlords because they're go-getters. They don't want to sit around. They want to do stuff. And so when they're displaced commercially from their vendor stall or their trade or their artisanship, when they're displaced in the economy, then they become these what we call warlords. These guys that then, you know, get their little gang together and create havoc in the culture because they don't want to sit around and follow. They want to do things. Yeah. And it was a really fascinating social look at it. Makes sense. You know, it does make sense when you hear it. But in the West here, we tend to not think about it because we see the pictures of the little, you know, starving children and whatever, and we.
Santa Claus comes on TV and we just want to throw money. You know,
the question of how is it best to help somebody?
Right.
Man, you know, if you have a caring spirit, that is just a gut-wrenching question, because the truth is, the way I first think would be the best to help you very well may not be the best way to help you. If you're an alcoholic and you're penniless and you're out here asking for $2 on the street, the way for me to help you is not give you $2 so you can buy alcohol. And that's simply enabling. But you know, that sounds hard nosed and tough. But the truth is, you know, I'm here to help you. Only works if it's really dealing with root causes, and not if it's just aiding and abetting the problem that's already there.
Well, teaching people how to fish versus just giving them fish, which I know you're very passionate about with your books and teaching entrepreneurial with farming, and that's something that's I really respect you for.
So that's right.
So back to the West, I want to instate Joel Salatin as head of agriculture, give him unlimited resources, unlimited policy. What do you do to turn this system around? How do you fix it?
Oh, my, what a great question. Well, I'll tell you what, you don't fix it from the top down, you fix it from the bottom up. And so what we have right now is a system that, through lots of reasons, incentivizes resource rape rather than resource stewardship or care, or I would even say increasing the commons. And so the first thing I would do is make direct food trade between farmers and customers completely off limits to government intervention. In other words, if you want to come to my farm, look around, smell around, ask around, and buy what I have for sale, we ought to be able to do business without a bureaucrat in between us. I mean, that is the most basic, primal, hunter-hunted, kind of neighbor commerce that you can imagine.
How are they in between right now?
Well, right now, if I have a milk cow and you come and you want to buy some milk from me, I can't sell you milk. It's illegal. They put me in jail if I sell you milk. If I go out here and butcher a cow and you want to come and buy a T-bone steak, I can't sell you a T-bone steak unless it goes through a government inspected facility.
Wow.
And so what that does, it does several things. One is that it artificially makes the small scale commerce, the kind of integrated community-based neighbor to commerce, with you, could I say cave to cave commerce that's happening, okay? That has always been normal. It makes that commerce impossible. And I don't have any problem saying it offends me that there are people that think that a bureaucrat has to get between me and my neighbor and I in every food transaction we do.
Joel, what about farmers markets? Isn't that direct?
Well, that is pretty direct, and I would include that kind of thing as being outside the purview of government. I certainly would.
Okay.
But those have a lot of regulations as well. I can't go there and sell what I've just described. I can't sell a quiche that I've made. I can't sell, a bologna. I can't sell charcuterie. I can't sell a vegetarian soup. I can't do any of this because there's going to be a health inspector there, asking me, did I get my label approved? Did I get my kitchen approved? Did I get my production facility improved? And did I get whatever, there's a whole list of that. What about my HACCP plan, and where's my temperature controls? And it just goes on ad nauseum. And so what that does is it arbitrarily shoves the food system toward the big players who have the clout and the money to garner for themselves concessionary legislation, regulation, and subsidies to create unfair market advantage, whether it's unfair market advantage from a legal standpoint or a price standpoint or availability standpoint or a distribution point standpoint. There's a lot of unfair advantages that somebody can have. And there are a lot of them in the food system. I meet thousands of farmers every year. I was just in Kitsap County, Washington, an hour away from Seattle this weekend, and met 100 farmers there, okay, who are on 10 and 12 and 15 acre farms, who are poised and ready to feed the entire area all the food that it needs. But what stands between them and the market are a host of zoning regulations, workplace regulations, food safety regulations, you name it. Just a host of these that are capricious, and they arbitrarily make an embryonic business virtually impossible because not enough money to pay for the overheads of paperwork and infrastructure that the system requires.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. Right now, they just made an ordinance, and they're going to require that if you have a farm intern, that the domicile that the farm intern is in, and that includes if it's an RV, okay? Now, so whatever domicile the farm intern is in, it has to be 200 square feet or larger. Now, gentle people, forgive me, but if I can be very happy living in 100 square feet or 199 square feet, by whose authority does anyone have the right to tell me that I can't live in anything less than 200 square feet. But these, and you say, well, what does that have to do with food? Well, it has to do a lot with food, because what happens is that a small farm trades pharmaceuticals and depreciable infrastructure for a higher degree of observation, labor, and management. Okay? So we strategically make the trade. Okay, we're not going to use the antibiotics. We're not going to use the pharmaceuticals. We're not going to pour concrete. We're not going to use the fans, energy intensive, and all that stuff. What we are going to use is we're going to use more people. And so I don't apologize for being a human-centric farm, okay? I think that what are humans for? I think we should have noble and sacred work to do. And so these highly intensified, multi-speciated, stackable, permaculture-type, integrated farms, a 10 to 12-acre produce operation, especially if they're running a commercial kitchen and value-adding anything, it takes people. It takes people to run that. And so suddenly I have this 10-acre farm, highly, highly productive farm, 5 times more productive than any commercial Cargill monoculture operation.
Right.
But that takes people. It takes people to do. And suddenly my cost of people is inordinately made very, very high because of this, three commissioners sitting there saying, well, we don't think anybody should live in a place under 200 square feet.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Joel, one thing that's going around right now in America, and clearly you're very opinionated and very educated, and you have a lot of backing, and I really want your take on it, is the legalization of medical marijuana. I mean, that's a type of farming now that you're seeing entrepreneurship. Time magazines project that there'll be billionaires there. Do you think that's good for farming and agriculture? Like, what's just your general opinion on what's going on with that in America?
Well, anybody that knows me knows that I'm not being satirical when I say, well, I would be in favor of legalizing everything. I mean, from methamphetamines to whatever. I think when the government gets between my lips and my throat, that's an invasion of privacy. And so I think that essentially allowing now, before somebody flips out, I'm also not in favor of national health care that will take care of people when they shoot their brains out. Okay.
Yeah.
So a part of I'm for freedom, but part of what makes freedom work is the responsibility that you personally engender for your decisions, and that's how you get then freedom with constraints. And so I am in favor of all the hemp. All the hemp that can be grown. I mean, the fact that currently, since the turn of the century, since hemp production was outlawed, the fact that the U.S. has had to buy all of its rope, all of its fiber from foreign countries, and farmers couldn't enjoy the value of that. And Henry Ford made a hemp car. It was cheaper than steel, lighter than steel, stronger than steel. But we don't have hemp cars, which would all be, basically you're making a car out of sunlight, okay? Right. Much better than mining steel, but we can't do it because hemp is illegal. And so I'm a fan of anything that releases farmers and releases the culture to be able to explore the metes and bounds of our own innovation.
Sure.
And if we don't have the government picking the winners and losers, then all of that experimentation will be done on a more proper scale. Take alcohol fuel. I'm not opposed to alcohol fuel, but it makes a big difference if that alcohol fuel is subsidized to the tunes of billions and billions of dollars, and we build taxpayer subsidized plants that, whether we need it or don't, whether it's good or not, that plant, by golly, we built that, we invested in it, and it's going to dominate the whole landscape. The whole landscape production plan is going to dominate that out 50 miles to keep that plant running, as opposed to, if you want to grow some corn and make alcohol, we'll do it, And so, we need to eliminate the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and allow people to grow their own fuel. We need to free up hemp so that it can be grown, and and allow cottage small scale value added commerce, and let neighborhoods do commerce with real market constraints and opportunities instead of fabricated market constraints and opportunities.
Sure, man. So we're coming up on time here. I want to respect it, but just as a closing couple things, a person who just listened to this call, they're really inspired and they want to know what to do. They want to know how they can get involved or make change or what to eat. What do you recommend? What are your quick, maybe 2 or 3 steps or recommendations for the person at home?
Yeah. Okay. So if we just narrow this down to food, what can you do on food? I've got 3 things. One is get in your kitchen. The most empowering thing you can do is get in your kitchen, learn about food, viscerally participate with it, and start doing it yourself. I mean, you're not going to put MSG in your food. You're not going to put a bunch of junk in your food, right? So get in your kitchen and cut the feet off of all these processors and big, food adulterators out there. Number 2, turn off the TV and take your entertainment budget for the year and spend it finding your food treasures in your area. Every area now has great farms that do integrity food, build soil, are doing all the right things. We'll find them and patronize them. Many of them are struggling. If they had 3 or 4 more customers, they could quit their town job and be on the farm full time. Be that catalyst, be that facilitator, move them forward that direction. And the third thing is do something yourself. It could be as simple as throwing out the gerbil and the cat and getting 2 chickens to eat your kitchen scraps and lay you eggs. And yes, this can be done in a condominium. It can be as simple as getting a vermicomposting bin under your sink instead of the garbage disposal. It could be a patio garden, where you have a pot garden. Yeah, really a pot garden. But where you have container gardening. You could have a beehive on the roof. There are lots of things that you can do yourself just to enjoy the satisfaction and encouragement of being a visceral participant in the majesty, the mystery, and the awesomeness of life.
Awesome, Joel. Your books, the most popular ones, You Can Farm, Salad Bar Beef, and Folks, This Ain't Normal, correct?
Yes.
And where can
you got it.
Where can they go to pick those up?
Well, they can get those off of Amazon. They can get them from our gift shop. They can get them from your local bookstore. They're all out there. They're all available. Chelsea Green Publishing is our distributor, okay. And they're very available.
And how do people at home right now support you and kind of what you do and get behind the mission? Is there any Facebook group or call to action you guys like to give out?
Yes, there's one, especially the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. That's a mouthful to say. And if you go to our website, polyfacefarms.com, of course, you can find these things. But as far as an organization, Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund is kind of the watchdog that's providing. Well, it's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association of this integrity food movement. And the truth is that there is an orthodoxy of food in this country, an orthodoxy of food in the farming, and there is a heresy. And people like me are the heretics. And so the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund is a group of attorneys who actually provide real-time counsel when the SWAT team or the food police come to your place and harass you for some, violation, and just like they were taking children away from homeschoolers 30 years ago and putting them in foster care, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association gave real-time legal counsel for people that were facing the truant officer. Today, we have the same thing now with the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, and I would like to see that become as powerful as the NRA. The day that Americans are just as interested in food freedom as they are gun rights freedom, we will have a very different country and a very, very different way we interact with our ecological rules.
Phenomenal, Joel. Again, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me so much. Take care.